Thank you. Call the member for Ballina.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I arise tonight to put on the record, and for people in this place to hear directly from those members of my community that have been either affected by the floods due to inundation last year or a landslide. Because right now, only a quarter of the people who applied for assistance under the Resilient Homes program to have their houses lifted out of harm's way, to have their houses retrofit in terms of better floodproofing in the future, or a buyback, only a quarter of the people who were deemed eligible, in the sense that they were assessed, they went through all of the processes, jumped through all of the hoops in the expectation that what was announced and what was constantly talked about with the former government was going to be met. Those expectations were going to be met. And here we find ourselves over 17 months on, and those thousands of people in the Northern Rivers, thousands of people in my electorate are still suffering, and they don't have that surety. And so ahead of the budget next week, the message from our community is very, very clear, and I know that the member for Lismore, the member for Tweed, the member for Clarence, some of the comments that people have written to me and expressed the impact of not having a second tranche, of missing out, I know that those MPs have also received them. And that is why today I took a box to the Premier of those letters so that he can see the impact that not funding the second tranche is having. Madam Speaker, Julian writes to me, "We officially received the call on Monday saying we are ineligible for the Resilient Homes program despite our house flooding to the ceiling in the 2022 floods. We are a family of 5 with 3 young daughters under the age of 10. We found the process incredibly traumatic." Christine writes to me, "Tamara, I live in South Golden Beach and my house was completely inundated up to my waist. I'm alone, widowed, on an age pension. And Christine tells me that she's used all her savings to raise her home so that she is protected from future floods. Christine was given the impression that she would qualify for a grant under the scheme to reimburse at least some of the costs it took. She wasn't." Simon writes to me, "Hey Tamara, I've just had a rather upsetting call from my partner whose entire property was lost in a landslide last year. He's been informed that his property is not a priority. I'm completely dumbfounded at how this is not a priority for a buyback." Hans, the son of 80-year-old David in Mullumbimby, told me that over a metre of floodwater ran through his father's home. David received a phone call from a nervous young woman from Service New South Wales who read a script saying that he would not be eligible for any assistance under the scheme. She could not answer any of his questions and he was left very distraught. Rachel from Ocean Shores writes that she was told by a woman reading off a script that her house was not a priority despite having over a metre of water inside and losing everything she owns. She writes, and I quote, that the anxiety when it rains is very stressful. Mr and Mrs Newton from Mullumbimby, who are both in their 80s, write that after their home was flooded, they raised their house on the basis of government announcements regarding grants, and we were told at local meetings by the NRRC they were not successful under the scheme. Lyndall and Christian and their young family from South Ballina missed out. They spent a night tied to their home in a boat and were unable to be rescued promptly despite calling the SES. Homes in the same street were eligible. They say to me, "This doesn't make sense." They were deemed ineligible. Susan from Mullumbimby has been flooded twice in the last year, lost 2 cars and her home inundated. She is still in temporary accommodation, paying rent at premium prices out of her own pocket. She wasn't eligible. Katie from Brunswick Heads writes, "Floodwater came in at 1.7 metres and my home was inundated, losing all possessions and my car and the house destroyed. My daughter and I escaped by paddleboard to a nearby veranda, but the floodwater was so fast flowing that we nearly ended up in the river, only saved by hanging onto a fence." Madam Speaker, these are the faces, these are just a snapshot of the voices of those people in my community who believe the promises and are still waiting and still suffering. And so I say to the Premier, this is an opportunity. It's not just about making whole those promises. This is actually about making sure that in future extreme weather events, these people are out of harm's way. Thank you.